Greetings everyone and welcome to True Crime Cast. In this video, we will be looking at the brutal slayings of the 4 University of Idaho students in the early morning hours of November 13, 2022. The victims, Ethan Chaplin, 20 years old, Xana Kernodle, 20 years old, Kaylee Goncalves, 21 years old, and Madison Mogen, also 21, had all returned to their residence at 1122 King Road in Moscow, Idaho, after an evening out in various locations around town. Also in the house, but unharmed, were 2 other roommates, Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funk. The reason for today's video isn't to rehash all the information we already know. This case has captured the world's attention and has already been very scrutinized by many other outlets. What I am hoping to do is take what we know and try to make some sense of the timeline and see if we can theorize what possible connection or motive suspect and alleged murderer Bryan Kohberger may have had. It is important to remember that this is only speculation based off the information the public has been allowed to see. Kohberger should be considered innocent until proven guilty by a court of law and a jury of his peers. We'll first start with the victims. On November 12th, before the 5 roommates and Ethan headed out to their various different spots for the evening, they all got together on the back porch and took an iconic picture that has now been seen around the globe. It was posted by Kaylee with the caption, "One lucky girl to be surrounded by these people every day." At around 9 p.m., Ethan and Xana are seen by witnesses helping set up a party at Ethan's fraternity and would remain there at the party until returning to the King Road residence around 1:45 a.m. Maddie and Kaylee spent the evening at a local bar called the Corner Club, starting at around 10 p.m. and leaving around 1:30 a.m., walking from the Corner Club to the Grub Truck Wandering Kitchen to grab some food to eat once returning home. The girls called for a ride service to pick them up and returned home around 1:56 a.m. The whereabouts of the 2 unharmed roommates, Dylan and Bethany, hasn't been disclosed by police, but it is believed that they were both back at the residence between 1 a.m. and 1:45 a.m. as well. Bethany is thought to have been at the same party as Xana and Ethan, as she reported to police that she was the one that saw them there from 9 till about 1:45 a.m. After being back at the residence for a couple of hours, at 4 a.m. Xana receives an order of Jack in the Box via DoorDash. At 4:12, while she is presumed to be eating her food, phone records show that she was on the TikTok social media app watching videos. Around this time is when Dylan reports that she heard what she thought was her roommates playing with Kaylee's dog upstairs, and then she says she hears Kaylee say, "There's somebody here." Nobody knows if this is the DoorDash driver or the suspect, and through the affidavit we don't know how it was spoken. We'll now be switching over to what we know about Bryan Kohberger's night. And to set this up with a little background, police have revealed through the affidavit that his phone had pinged near their house no less than 12 times in the months prior to the murders. At 2:47 a.m., a phone belonging to suspect Bryan Kohberger stops connecting to the tower in Pullman, where he attends Washington State University and is a PhD student studying criminal justice. At 2:53 a.m., surveillance cameras pick up what is believed to be the suspect's vehicle, a white Hyundai Elantra, leaving Pullman and heading towards Moscow, Idaho. At 3:29 a.m., what is believed to be the same white Elantra is seen on neighborhood surveillance systems passing the King Road residence 3 different times. At 4:04 a.m., that same white Elantra is once again seen, but this time it makes a 3-point turn adjacent to the residence where the murders took place. It is at this point the suspects and the victims' paths are now intersecting. At 4:17, a security camera 50 feet from the residence picks up what sounds to be whimpering and a loud thud. A dog can also be heard barking multiple times in this video. It is also around this time that the victim's roommate, Dylan, who was also in a second-floor bedroom, the same floor as Ethan and Xana, hears what she believes was crying coming from Xana's bedroom. Dylan opens her door to investigate and then hears a male voice telling someone something to the effect of, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." Dylan, most likely not knowing what was going on, closes her bedroom door and goes back to her room. Dylan then opens her door for a 3rd time, and this time it's unclear why, most likely just trying to figure out what's going on. But this time, as she looks out, she comes face to face with a stranger walking through her house, wearing all black clothes, possibly a surgical mask that only exposes his upper face. She reports to the police that the suspect that she saw was about 5'10" or taller, male, not very muscular, but athletically built, and had bushy eyebrows. Upon seeing this person that she doesn't know walking through her house, she becomes instantly shocked. Not sure what's going on, she locks her door, and then there is no more interaction between her or the suspect. She goes to bed and will remain there until just before noon later that morning. The suspect then leaves the residence at 4:17 a.m. via the back sliding glass door, returning to his white Elantra, and he is seen on surveillance footage speeding away at 4:20 a.m. At 4:48, Kohberger's phone reconnects to the cell tower network south of Moscow, near Blaine, Idaho, which is made up mostly of farm fields. It is unclear why he took a southern route, leaving town, and then doubled back north to the town of Pullman. Some have speculated he may have been getting rid of the evidence, cleaning up, or getting rid of his clothing, but none of that is revealed in the affidavit. It is unclear why he would have gone the southern route, but at this time, anything we would be guessing would just be pure speculation. At 5:30, Kohberger is back at his residence in Pullman. However, just a short 3.5 hours later, his phone once again pings right near the scene of the crime in Moscow, Idaho. I'm guessing he probably figured out that his sheath was missing, or he had left some evidence, or was just trying to check the crime scene. But whatever it is, he pulled in there around 9:12, and he leaves the area at 9:21 a.m. A little before noon, the roommates wake up and discover the scene of the crime. They run outside hysterically. One faints. The 911 call did come from one of the roommates' phones. However, earlier reports kind of got muddled. There were reports that there was a third person that picked up the phone and used their phone to call it in and called in an unconscious person. There was all sorts of things. But the real story has come out, and that is that the girls were so hysterical that the 911 operator didn't know what was going on and actually called it into the police as an unconscious person because they didn't understand the situation that was at hand. This now brings us to what we know about the crime scene. Out of respect for the families and victims, I will be keeping these details as basic as possible. Xana was found either in the doorway to her room or just inside her room's doorway. She had defensive wounds from fighting off her attacker. Ethan was found on the bed. We don't know if he was sleeping or if he had fought off his attacker as well. Both were deceased from multiple stab wounds. Kaylee and Madison were found in the upstairs bedroom. Both deceased from multiple stab wounds as well. Both victims were found deceased in the same bed. It is speculated that one had appeared to possibly be trying to escape her attacker when she too was attacked and then ended up falling or being placed on top of the first victim. It is inside this room where investigators immediately noticed a knife sheath with K-Bar USMC and the Marines insignia stamped on the outside of it. Through the affidavit, we found out that this item contained a single source of male DNA, and this DNA has been linked back to the Kohberger family by using a public DNA database. With the high points of the affidavit listed out for you, now we get to the why, or even just the possible connections between the victims and the suspect. Everything from this point on is just pure speculation. Nothing more is known other than what has been released, but I'm going to go over a few possible connections, then paint a single picture of how these horrible murders could have possibly happened and explain why Dylan may have not thought to call 911 that night. People have been extremely rough on her, and I think her actions were actually what probably anyone would have done, and I'll explain later. And moving on, now we get to the connection. The most likely connection between the victims and Bryan Kohberger is the fact that he was a strict vegan. He wouldn't even eat food that had been prepared in pans that also had meat prepared in them. Xana and Maddie both worked at a local restaurant called the Mad Greek. It was one of only a handful of vegan restaurant options in the area. So it's a true possibility that he frequented that place and had maybe even been waited on by one of those girls. After Kohberger was named the main suspect, the story came about that he was once warned about his treatment of the female staff at a microbrew near his home in Pennsylvania. The owner actually had to go up to him, sit down at his table, and say to him, "Are we going to have any more problems with you today, or are you going to treat the girls proper?" He never returned to that establishment after that. Now, is it possible the girls had an interaction with him? Maybe he became angry with them for some odd reason they never even noticed, or maybe he became infatuated with one of them, or both of them. You just don't know. Or what about Kaylee? Did Kaylee used to go to that establishment, sit at the tables with the girls while they were working? Maybe he saw her, and maybe she became the target of his obsession. We just don't know. Another possible connection, but way more far-fetched, is that it was reported that Xana's sister goes to Washington State University, the same school as Kohberger. Maybe a chance meeting during a visit with her sister could have put Xana on Kohberger's radar. It could possibly have something to do with the Washington State University football game. It took place on September 3rd of 2022, and they just happened to be playing the University of Idaho. Perhaps they went to the game, maybe Bryan was there, maybe they saw each other, maybe there was an incident that never showed up on any of their radar, but maybe it upset him. or maybe he knew her from the restaurant. There's always that option as well. Maybe he had a connection with Xana. Maybe she was the target. We just really don't know. And then also, we know Xana liked Jack in the Box from the crime scene evidence. Maybe she frequently ate there. The only Jack in the Box in the area is in Pullman, which is only a few minutes from Kohberger's apartment. I am sure there are plenty of other connections possible, but for right now we're going to leave it at that and move on to the speculation of how the murders took place. This will paint an extremely dark scenario, so please be warned and stop watching if you don't want to hear this. Remember, Bryan Kohberger is innocent until proven guilty, and this is just speculation from the evidence that we have been given. This theory could be spot on, or it could be miles from the truth. But what I did was build a story from the evidence that the police have given us. If more evidence comes available later, I'm sure the story would change. So first off, we're going to start with the most damning evidence. In the affidavit, it said Bryan Kohberger had left his residence and traveled down to Moscow on 12 different occasions, pinging his phone near the house where the 4 victims were murdered. This happened on 12 different occasions, and yet on this night, at 2:47, when Bryan left his house, he turned off his phone. The only reason he turned off his phone was because he knew he would be committing those murders, and he was trying to make sure that the police could not track his whereabouts. Fortunately for the victims in this case, most people have Ring doorbell cameras, and he was picked up driving by their house 3 different times, and then stopping and turning around the 4th time and parking right in front of their house. So cell phone on or off, there's no way he can deny that he was not at their residence that evening. At 4 a.m., Bryan Kohberger, after driving past the residence on King Road 3 times, parks and is outside the residence watching the house. The setup of the house would give him multiple locations where he could watch the victim's activities. Also at 4 a.m., Xana gets her food delivered from DoorDash, checks on Ethan, maybe he's already sleeping, eats her food in the kitchen, her own room with Ethan, or takes it upstairs to Maddie and Kaylee's room. Either way, she ends up in the room with Maddie and Kaylee. It's at this point when I believe the suspect enters the house. The girls are upstairs talking and playing with the dog, and they hear what sounds like the front door closing, or maybe the sliding door opening and closing, stating that there's someone here, both being heard by Dylan, the dog barking and being played with, and the comment, "There's someone here." Since it was already late, and I'm sure Xana would have just went upstairs to kind of spend a few minutes with the girls before going to bed, she would have probably exited the bedroom, taking the dog and putting the dog in the other spare bedroom on the 3rd floor. Then she'd go down the steps, not thinking anything bad is going to happen. Maybe tells them she'll go check and see what's going on, see if it wasn't Ethan or someone else, somebody they know going in or out of one of the doors. And she just leaves and goes downstairs not knowing what is about to happen to her. Maddie and Kaylee, not worried about anything, just turn off the lights and drift to sleep. As Xana comes downstairs, she probably looks around a little bit, doesn't see anything, so she goes back to her room. As she walks in and gets a little closer to Ethan, maybe she sees blood. But is it serious, or is he just kidding? Does she immediately go into shock? Is she in stunned silence? Or maybe does she just think, ha ha ha, come on Ethan, quit joking around? Before she knows it, Bryan Kohberger probably comes out from behind the door or a closet, puts his hand around her mouth, and puts a knife up against her throat. This would be when she would start to cry, which would be muffled by his hand, and this would probably be the crying that Dylan hears. And then here's the man's voice saying, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." Dylan hears this, but maybe she doesn't want to get involved in any drama or doesn't think it's anything serious. So she goes back in her room. It's a very safe town, and there's 6 people in the house. Why would there be any reason that she should be worried? Then Kohberger, realizing that his statement of, "It's okay, I'm going to help you," doesn't calm Xana down. Kohberger then murders Xana and makes his way towards the 3rd floor, expecting to only find Maddie. Kaylee had just purchased the new Range Rover 2 days prior, so even though he was stalking them, he wouldn't have recognized Kaylee's new car and wouldn't have expected her to be home. He then enters the dark room, only expecting Maddie to be there, and as he attacks her, he realizes there is a second female in the room as well, and she is trying to escape. He then grabs Kaylee, throwing her down hard enough to create a loud thud or thump that is picked up on the neighbor's Ring camera. This would also make the dog start to bark, which is also caught on that camera as well. Kohberger, being caught completely off guard by Kaylee being there, exits the room all flustered and doesn't realize as Kaylee was trying to escape, she pulled his knife sheath off, and he has now left it behind in the room next to their bodies. As he exits the room and heads down the steps, he is still in shock by Kaylee even being there, and he never even notices Dylan as he walks out and goes right past her as he's exiting through the back sliding door. He gets back into his car, and around 4:20, he is seen driving away from the residence and is caught on several different video cameras. He takes the southern route out of Moscow once again. At 4:48, he switches his phone back on, just south of Moscow, near Blaine, Idaho. Blaine, Idaho is mostly just farm fields, so hopefully he wasn't removing evidence or getting rid of evidence, but who knows, because it did take him quite a while to get home. It was 5:30 by the time he got back to his apartment. About 4 hours later at 9:12, most likely realizing he lost his sheath and may have left evidence behind, he gets back into his car, drives back down to Moscow, parks at the residence, and that is where he stays for the next 9 minutes. From 9:12 to 9:21, he is back at the residence. Now, we're not sure if he went there to get the sheath or if it was just to watch the aftermath of what he had done. Either way, much to his surprise, there was no action when he got back. The sheath was inside, so he probably didn't have the guts to go in there. He looked probably around the parking lot or where his car was parked, couldn't find it, and he went home. Now this brings us to Dylan's reaction. She's getting criticized unfairly, I think, for not calling 911 at that time. But as you know, nobody calls 911 in fear that they're going to be ridiculed or be making a mistake. Plus, this was an extremely safe city. There aren't a lot of crimes. There's nothing to really be worried about. There was 6 people in the house. This was a party house. People came and went all the time. Maybe this was just someone Ethan knew or something that she didn't see come in the house. Regardless, Kohberger was wearing all black, so she probably couldn't see the blood because it would have been hidden by the black clothing. And all she saw was some guy with bushy eyebrows walk past her and leave the residence. Now this probably creeped her out enough to think, well, I don't know who the heck that was. I'm going to lock my door and I'm going to sleep because I don't know what's going on, but it doesn't involve me, so I'm going to bed. Now she then wakes up the next morning, sees one of the most horrific scenes a person could ever imagine in their life, runs and gets her roommate. She also sees it, and from what we are hearing now, they both ran outside hysterical, and they are the ones that actually made the phone call. However, they were so hysterical, it was the 911 operator that could not understand what they were saying, and that person is who told police that there was an unconscious person there. They were just making the assumption that that is what the call was about. They had no idea that what they were actually trying to do was report a quadruple homicide. The police then show up and they are shocked at what they find. Remember, this scenario was just created from the witness accounts and the evidence that has been released in the affidavit. It could totally be wrong. It could be somewhat right, and I'm sure as the trial comes out, we'll probably all be shocked at what's found. But with what we have now, this is what I could come up with. If you have any comments or critiques or anything, since this is our first major long video, I would love to hear them in the comments. I know people don't like saying that because they don't want to hear criticism, but I'd really like to try to make this a quality true crime channel. And if you've made it this far, once again, I'd appreciate it if you would like this video and then subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. Thanks for listening. Stay safe out there, and remember, always be kind to one another. Until next time, this has been True Crime Cast.